All right, all of you freedom-loving boys and girls, Mark and your other host, Redbeard, over at Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching or listening to this podcast, we say it all the time, but we mean it every time. You are the resistance. So here we go, getting ready to kick off episode 20. Unless my very old, addled brain has failed me, but this is episode 20. And in tonight's episode, we've got on, as you can see, well, if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can't see, but we have three very special guests here tonight. Two of these guests have been on before. They need no introduction, but we will still do it anyway. But then we have a very special new guest, Blackbeard, a.k.a. Steven. Maybe just wave, everybody. That's Steven. There you go, a little thumbs up. There's a joke there. We'll get to that at some point in the podcast here. But here we go. Tonight's podcast, giving everything that has happened, transpired in, I guess, really kind of like the last 7 to 10 days. We did this episode. Oh gosh, Redbeard, we kind of, I hate like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it was either 2 or 3 episodes ago. We talked about UFOs. So whatever you want to call them, UFOs or UAPs, whatever, you do you. I just UFOs, unidentified, whether they are in the atmosphere or in water, aquatic, it's unidentified. So I still like UFO, but we're going to revisit this in light of everything that's happened, the congressional hearings, some recent video that's come out, and we've got our star-studded panel of badasses here, and we're going to sit and just have a down-to-earth conversation on it. And as I introduce everybody, they'll tell you a little bit about themselves, and we'll just go around from there. Redbeard, what do you got in the way of introduction? Anything more to add to that, or should we just kick it, sir?
Nothing. I think anybody that knows both you and me, Mark, they kind of have an idea of our backgrounds. So I would just defer people to our other podcasts episodes just to figure out a little more about us. So that's about it.
Right on. All right, so we're going to jump right into it, boys and girls. So the title of this video kind of says it all. So whatever you want to call it, UFO, UAP, again, you do you. It doesn't matter. We're adults. We know what we're talking about. To me, the real question is, like, what's really going on here? Why are we having these hearings? Why are these conversations? Is this all, kabuki theater? Is it all, bread and games? Or is it real? And we've just become so numb to all the bullshit that has been going on with, governments writ large, that they could actually present the evidence tomorrow and we would just like, yeah, whatever, I don't give a shit, right? So it's really that. So I'm going to start off with one question as a way to introduce everybody, and just so you get a sense of where we're going to go with this. I'm going to bring it over to you first, Blackbeard, here in a second, and tell us what you want to share with about yourself with everybody who's watching. But here's the real question, fellas, is what are your thoughts? Is it real? Like this whole concept of UFOs or alien life, do you think it's real, or do you think that this is all, I'm just going to use the term BS. It's not the most eloquent term, but you see what I'm saying? Is this just something that we're all being, having the wool pulled over our eyes for, ulterior motives, or is this actually real? So we're going to come over to Blackbeard. What does your thing say? Amateur ufologist. And okay, gotcha. Right. There's some good, you guys are really doing good things with your names here. All right, Blackbeard, coming to you first here. What do you got? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you think? Is this live or is this Memorex?
As I stated, under my title there, I would just emphasize the amateur aspect of that. This is just a topic that I'm fascinated with and that I think is very important, honestly. I do think it is real. It doesn't mean that there aren't elements of deception that are involved in it, because that's just the nature of something, especially as revelatory as what we're talking about. As far as autodidact, that just indicates that I am self-taught. And so you should take everything I say with a grain of salt, and it's subject to change with new information.
Myself off mute. I'd muted everybody just because sometimes when there's this many people, you actually can get the reverb through our speakers and stuff on each side, everybody's side. So autodidact, self-taught. I think there's not a single person here tonight that's going to claim to be like a schooled or educated ufologist or, some expert on it. I think we all kind of have a lot to add to it from our own special ways. So on that note right there, let me just bring it over to the non-suspicious CIA guy, DB, over there with his well, I don't know if that's a Washington Nationals hat or what that's supposed to be. It could be I think that's your kids team, isn't it?
Kids all-star team.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's a great hat, man, by the way.
I love it.
I you never gave me one of those hats from Benghazi, but I would definitely take one of those hats. So,
I could probably get you one of these, maybe.
Yeah, you
That's
can't get me the
that's an
Benghazi
awesome hat, by the
son of
way.
a- All right, let's bring it over to our next guest, DB, the non-suspicious CIA guy. And as a way of intro, let me just say this, full disclosure. David and I know each other from a previous life. We were both in the agency with each other. We, we created the capitalist caliphate during some really messed up times. And that was actually a funny story, which he's told once, and I hope it comes up again tonight. But more importantly, so again, this is just a subject that's of interest. And I just want to do kind of another full disclosure before we bring it over to David. Yeah, we were both in the agency. And right now somebody's saying, well, there's no way I'm listening to these two idiots because they were part of the system. They're the man. Well, I don't work there anymore. Neither does Dave. We both left for probably very similar reasons. But you are right to kind of question that and doubt that. Mm-hmm. I'm just simply saying that if I would have been a whistleblower, so I was never exposed, that would have been a special access program. I was never read into any of that. I was never called out to go recover bodies or any of that kind of crap. But had I, and if I was in front of Congress, I wouldn't have just been saying, hey, we have to talk about this in a skiff or go, or reference my previous conversation. I would have come with the proof and I would have talked about, I would have shared everything I possibly could have on this subject because I think it's that important. So with that being said, I turn it over to our other guest, the non-suspicious CIA guy, DB.
Kind of on the point you were setting me up for is I wouldn't be in front of Congress talking about this. I'd have written a book. I would have got the movie rights. I would have done what every good Navy SEAL does, like make money off it all. So that's just so you look at the bank account. I haven't written a book. So.
That is funny. So you would have just actually used it for your own, again, the capitalist caliphate. You would have turned it into, I know something. I'm gonna make a series and a movie about this and make some money.
I want nothing to do with Congress. So.
Right on. All right. Hey, so that's a good joke, but you want to tell everybody, just in case they didn't catch you in that other previous podcast, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Basically just another CIA guy that you could trust for sure. Totally non-suspicious. Served with you. You always had my back overseas. We went to, some of the more fun places, beautiful deserts, that kind of stuff. If it was happening about 10 years ago, we were part of it. So that's kind of fun. That's about all I got on me. No one's going to believe it anyway. So,
well, yeah. Well, especially with that title you just gave yourself. I mean, that exudes confidence right there.
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
That's right. That's right. The emperor has no clothes. All right, let's bring it over to Paul. Paul, you are still muted. If you want to go ahead, and everybody should recognize Paul. I want to give a personal shout out. Paul has really been just an awesome human being and has helped us with a couple of the podcasts and the training courses that we were doing. So huge shout out to Paul. He is becoming a fixture over here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here every time. What I would say is that you'll see me change my glasses in and out because, long story, but bad eyes. So when I think of this topic, so my background is, 30 years in information technology, 20 of it in information security. And, it's all primarily corporate, but that's where I've worked. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. Okay. The technology we had maybe was a Commodore VIC-20 or a Commodore 64. Then we got into the Apple IIs. If I would have thought that I could have had a drone where I could surveil my property, video my property, do all kinds of other things, at my age, a couple decades or more later, I would have never believed it. So that's where I come in here as to, all right, some of this stuff looks absolutely crazy. But I'm a little hesitant. I'm a skeptic, but I'm not in denial because I do believe that, anything's possible. I have an open mind and, I may also be here because my wife is interested in this topic, and I have a chupacabra. Swear.
You have a.
I do.
That's spicy.
My dog, one of my dogs, absolutely resembles a chupacabra in personality and not quite the looks, but close. So, and at times, red zone times, when hunting, that dog looks like a chupacabra to me. So I fit into all that.
I don't know what a chupacabra looks like, but something tells me I'm already getting an image. And so again, and I'm sorry, we'll come back over to you first, Dave, because we kind of were joking so much we forgot one thing. But for you, Redbeard, let's bring it over to you. I mean, even though you're host, what are your thoughts? Is this real, or is this just all, or what do you think is actually going on? Like, why is this happening right now? Again, that short answer.
Yeah. So basically, like, the only thing I can think of is, I definitely feel like there's truth and there's reality to it, right? I do find that it's fairly convenient that this is going on in light of other situations. So I feel like, in the grand scheme of things, could it be, a little bit of circus and charade, albeit there's truth to it? Sure. I would, and the reason I say also that I believe there's a lot of truth and reality to this is, Mark, you've heard me say this before, but we literally just found something like, what was it, like the giant squid, like only a decade ago, right? Like, so the idea that we can't possibly conceive that there's other life out there, there's other, life forms out there, technologically advanced or otherwise, like, it just, I find that more unbelievable that there isn't than there is. So that's my position on it. I mean, if we're still finding things that we had no idea were there before, to me, that's kind of all I need to rabbit hole it. So, David,
we got sidetracked with your hat and your subtitle. So what about you? I mean, what do you think? Do you think this is it's legit, or do you think there's something else going on here? What are your general thoughts so far?
So I'm probably on a very healthy skeptic side, having worked for arguably one of the most secretive organizations on the planet in one of the more secretive departments of that organization. I just don't believe in the competency of our government, of our intelligence agencies, of our military, of our scientists to keep this a secret. So if people know, this is such a vast conspiracy. I mean, it's such an extraordinary claim. And what was it, Carl Sagan? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And that's all I need. I need to see the evidence. I need to see it being not just a little bit, not just a video by one single dude doing one thing. It needs to be mass. It needs to be huge, extraordinary, beyond belief, where it shoots down every skeptic in the world. And I get it. That's a high bar. But we're talking about something that'll change humanity's story, right? So if it's going to be that big in my mind, it's going to require evidence that's equal to that. But I go back to my basis. It has less to do is if it does exist or not. I would imagine it does exist just based on the numbers. My point's more from the government standpoint. These guys don't know what the hell they're doing. Like, massive conspiracy, not just across our government, our intelligence, our military, our scientists, NASA, but foreign governments, foreign space agencies, foreign scientists. The entire world's in on this, hostile and friendly nations, egos of billionaires, corporations, these guys, Musk. Come on, Donald Trump, if he knew about this, don't you think he would have taken the opportunity to be like, all right, this is going to be the biggest event in the history of man. This is the video that's going to be replayed for the rest of eternity. Goddamn right, it's going to be my face up there telling the world, right? Like, I just go back to human nature, our government's nature, and until I see that extraordinary evidence, I just don't buy. I've worked with these people, man.
Well, let me address that. Throw my just my just again 2-sentence comment on it, and I want to kind of bring this back over to, well, we'll see if Blackbeard has a question to start off, but otherwise I've got a question to start off Redbeard has a question. Then I'm going to start off with Blackbeard. Too many men with beards. It's freaking me out. But then I got a question for Blackbeard, and David, you just alluded to it, so don't let me forget, Blackbeard. When I come to you, there's multiple layers here on this. Who might know about it? Who might be in control of it? So I agree with David, but I also disagree with David a little bit because, and I'm not saying David's right or I'm right. We both could be right to some extent. I think that's the nuance of this. So here, just there, without further ado, I think mathematically speaking, if we agree that there's billions of galaxies, well, then how arrogant and naive to think that God and God's great wisdom, that we're the only thing that exists in all this vast cosmos. What are we that special that it took a couple other billion galaxies to figure out how to make just us, the only living, sentient beings in the whole cosmos? I just don't buy that, right? I think that's just mathematically, that doesn't make any sense. But before somebody throws me under the bus, that doesn't mean that any other form of life has achieved like interdimensional travel or faster than light travel, FTL. So I just don't know. And because I just don't know what I don't know. But in my heart of hearts, of course, I want to believe it. And then in my kind of more adult scientific brain, I'm like, how could that not be? And Stephen might take us down this road. I mean, there's lots of people who've been working on different equations to try to figure out the probability of life, intelligent life on foreign planets. We'll see if that comes up in the conversation. But all I just want to say is that in the right here, right now, everything that just happened in the last week, I don't. There was some deception indicated by one of the people at the hearing. I saw somebody else in the gallery who I think is a grifter. And the moment I see that guy, and so I'm being very honest, I become a little biased because whenever I see that guy, and I'm not going to name any names, go look at the testimony yourself. I'm just like, God, there's a grifter in the crowd. There's going to be an element of bullshit here. So I'm just really skeptical of that, but that doesn't destroy my faith or my understanding of the probability of life, extraterrestrial life that's out there. Unless somebody else has something to chime in or rebut that. I mean, David, if you want to say
No, I'm more on the side of this all could happen. This all could be out there. I'm just on the government's not good enough to cover it up. The people aren't good enough to cover it up. Like it could be happening, but it's so classic of our government to be so incompetent. They don't even know it's happening.
But it's actually funny because it's only funny because it's so sad and true. But David knows the rebuttal I'm going to give here because David and I worked on some things, and David even probably worked on things that I don't know about. So actually, that organization can do a pretty damn good job of keeping things compartmentalized. I mean, special access, read only. You're not part of this group. So there are some things. So to David's point, I'm just going to throw this out there for everyone who's like the skeptic. Here's two CIA guys talking about shit. I get where you're coming from. I don't work there anymore. So how about that? And I'll show you my bank account. I don't have any hidden bank account with money coming in to disinform or dissuade people. But I'm just trying to say we actually are really good at some things. But to David's point, I think on something so politically and socially charged an issue, somebody would have leaked that shit because I'm raising my hand. I would have leaked that shit. I would have been like, oh, hell no. Extraterrestrial life and we're talking to him and there's lizard people, whatever your thing is. I would have been like, oh, come on, man. There's no way I'm going to shut up. And so unless anyone else has got an objection or a rebuttal or a comment, I'm going to bring
one quick thought. And I want to support DB here because I do believe, going back to my thought on, not realizing it's possible to have a drone as a person. I do believe our military or our governments globally, they all have the technology to do the stuff that we've been seeing in the sky. And I do agree that if there was alien life, there's no way that it would have been kept a secret at this point. And that's all.
Well, so again, that's where I was trying to bring this up. I'm like, I kind of agree and I disagree. To David's point, I totally agree. The larger bureaucracy writ large is very incompetent. So I totally understand that. However, when we actually apply ourselves, we're really good at keeping secrets. We are really good at keeping secrets, tradecraft methods, all that stuff. So I'm kind of still on the board on that one. And I think Blackbeard's got some interesting points. That doesn't necessarily prove any of us right. And I don't think this is a conversation about who's right or who's wrong. I think it's just a conversation because something's going on. I mean, you know, and if we're being told the truth, it's funny to me how few people seem to give a shit right now.
Right. But my point is, I want to be wrong. How rad would that be? Life-changing event, history-changing event. Dude, I want that to happen.
Yeah.
I want it to come out. That's why I love the topic.
Dave, you are the embodiment of make me believe. I freaking love it.
Make me believe it.
That's great. That's a great point. And I think Blackbeard's gonna, because we've already kind of talked about this a little bit. Hey, full disclosure, you know what? You go ahead, Blackbeard, say what you want to say here. I mean, I don't know if you want to. I'll just shut up. You go.
Oh, well, I would just say that, you know, I don't know that there's necessarily a government conspiracy in operation. I only got to watch clips of what was put out there. But for me, the way I view that is it's not so much what's revealed, but how it's revealed so that it will fit a certain framework of perception. And so, you know, whether that's true, whether it's not, for me, a lot of it's based off of testimony from abductees that I know personally that have no incentive in lying to me. In fact, I disclose it to very few people because it would be embarrassing for their professional careers. I think that if you work in private industry, that you're afforded certain levels of efficiency and are able to skirt certain levels of accountability, perhaps, that you wouldn't in a government context, although the government has sovereign immunity. And, you know, as far as you were talking about the probability of extraterrestrial life, that's kind of related to something called the Fermi paradox, which is people questioning it, right? Okay, so you're familiar with that. So, you know, all that to say is that I'm certainly not offering proof at all, and I wouldn't ever claim that I have proof of it. But I think for me, just from my own experiences and from the people that I know, that I'm convinced that there's a reality to the phenomenon, and I don't think it even requires a government conspiracy. I'm not saying there isn't one. I just don't know that that's the case at all.
So just for the group, I want to just throw this out there. So Blackbeard and I were talking about this. Blackbeard saw our UFO thing and kind of sent me a message. And, you know, we've talked in the past anyway about other things. I mean, I really respect the man. I think he's really intelligent. But it kind of, what he just brought up there, I'm glad happened, because I'm bringing this all the way back down to David and Paul and well, for anyone else who's watching, who's on that fence about the I want to believe, but I'm skeptical. And I think, you know, something that Blackbeard just said, which I like, because that was kind of my thought as well, which is, imagine if you were, so in the pregame, so we don't really rehearse what we're going to say, but we have a general idea, and we do it. So before we hit record, we kind of just talk through, okay, here's how the intro is going to go. And then after that, we're going in this direction or wherever it goes, type of thing. But to that point, you know, when you start talking about outside of the government, so to David's point, on the government at certain levels, on certain, in my opinion, for certain categories, certain issues, it's leakier than, you know, a bucket with a hole with no bottom, right? People will just leak this all out because there's political motive, there's all these other motives. But I think, and I'm not trying to make a dichotomy here, but I think to what Blackbeard just said, and then juxtapose that with what David said about the government's incompetent. My point is, I think at certain levels the government is competent, and to Blackbeard's position, I think when you get into the civilian sector, then we all know that there's way more competency than you're ever going to get from the government. So if, for example, I'm just going to throw this out there, guys, if Roswell was real and something had happened, and if everybody at the senior ranks in the military is looking and vying and being groomed for a position at lock, and none of these companies, you can't sue me, I'm just making examples, right? I'm not saying that you guys are doing this, but whether it's Lockheed Martin or Boeing or whoever it is in that aerospace realm, if you realize, to David's point, the capitalist caliphate, if you realize you just got your hands on just earth-shattering technology. Here, Cyberdyne, to use Terminator as a bad example. Yep, yeah, Jeremy, I got one laugh out of that, but that's exactly, I think, to Blackbeard and David's point. It doesn't. Those are not diametrically opposed suppositions. I think they kind of still swim in the same pond, if that makes sense. And so Blackbeard and David, now that I've just kind of vomited that, who wants to respond to that, or do you want to add? Paul's laughing. Do you see where I'm kind of going? I don't think either of you are wrong. I think you're both right, but you come at it from a slightly different perspective. But I kind of, David, actually, let me go to David first. David, to Blackbeard's point, if it's a civilian organization that had got its hands on this technology somehow, even if it was the military who first recovered it, every one of those generals want to be on that board of directors. They want that big fat paycheck. That I really do believe. Well, that's where we are now. I think we're at that point because of things that have happened in the past. So does that strengthen or weaken, or does it change your mind at all? Or is it really still the same thing, David?
Like I said, I mean, all this is little data points. I'm looking for that extraordinary evidence, right? People with the corporations with the resources, we're talking, something like Elon Musk or Bezos, these guys who are running these massive space programs, commercial and private, they have incentives to get that technology, I suppose, but keeping it a secret or not making money off of it in the same way. Generally speaking, I think a lot of our military technology starts out, it's like the one story where people in the past, technology looks like magic to them, right? And I think we're in that same point where our military, whether it's spacecraft or whatever we're developing, to us could look like magic, aliens, something else. But to them, to the military, it's just advanced technology, kind of how the A-12 was developed or the F-117, projects like that looked like it couldn't be explained by our current knowledge of the current technology of that state, right? Where the only thing
I do think I do think we're on an order of magnitude in difference. So when you saw the F-117, you still identified it as a terrestrial-based aircraft. You knew, your eye still saw that. It's like, hey, that's an advanced fighter. That's what you would have seen. I've never seen anything like it before, but you would not have said that's alien technology, right? Because the engines, the propulsion, all of that. That's kind of my argument right there. Is I think that's the difference. Is to your point. But if you were a native of America, and then there's suddenly the tall mast ships, Columbus, there's been, I think we brought this up last time, that they just couldn't even see it because they just couldn't even recognize it was so that would have been so completely foreign. And I think that's kind of the argument right here is like, but that doesn't take away from the point that is it government or is it the civilian sector? I mean, so in other words, like if you see a UFO, does your brain block it out? Do you look at it and say, I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm at a level of advancement as a species that I know it's got to be working on some form of propulsion. Even if I don't understand what it is, it still has to have some type of power source. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, even to the experimental aircraft, a lot of the times it was flown at night, and all you see from the ground are the lights. So you're seeing lights doing things that don't necessarily make sense in a place that it shouldn't be. Typically, it's always over the deserts of Nevada, which tells you exactly what it is. There's common sense there, but I think a part of that. But going back to if you look at the Aztecs when they first saw all the conquistadors or whoever coming over, they didn't necessarily think they were humans. They actually thought they were gods, right? That they were, so even then when you're looking at it directly, you still do not know how to explain it rationally. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm just
no. I agree. I just think it's a little different for us because we are, unlike the civilization back during the 14th 15th century. We've got movies and cell phones and computers, so we're a little bit I think we're a little bit more open-minded. But I see Redbeard wants to chime in, so let me bring it over to Redbeard. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Just real quick, I actually have something, and it might be more specifically towards Blackbeard and Paul, because it's more of and Mark and Dave, you guys might have heard about this as well. But I had to, as Dave was talking, I was kind of looking on my phone to try and remember what it was I was going to bring up. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with CERN and the Large Hadron Collider, and how these people have admittedly basically said, like, hey, yeah, like we're just 100% trying to like that rip open a black hole, right? Like, okay, well that's quite a significant feat. Like, first off, why would you do that? Because at least from what people have studied, like black holes are not they're suboptimal to try and do, right? They don't play nice with other things. You know, you look at something like that, and it's said like when that something like that fires up, you can hear it kind of around the world. Now, whether or not that there's truth to that, I can say, like, you know, there's a lot of people that have said, you know, on this date, like there's a lot of the same noise. I don't know. I hadn't followed it very well until I had started hearing about it, but for something like that, you know, and I'd love to hear everybody's response on this. I mean, you're talking about something that it's a particle accelerator, I believe.
Yeah.
It's the most powerful particle accelerator in the world. And I'm not necessarily indicating that it has any origin extraterrestrial or whatever, but could something like that not potentially signal, if it's that powerful, and if it does what people say it can do, like, hey, like we're doing some crazy stuff over here, and it's like a dinner bell to something else. Like, I don't know, because people have admittedly said, like, look, we're dealing with something that is way out of the realm of anything we're actually familiar with. So, what say you guys?
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Paul. I mean, it's kind of you know, he's the techie amongst us. But I'm just going to throw it there. I mean, you know, your kind of observation. You know, there's a lot of people, and then I want to come back, circle around over to Blackbeard on this, that make that same argument. Once we acquired atomic weapons, and then, you know, then advanced, that these were these other signals. So I think there's something to be said with that. But let's go back to Paul for CERN. Paul, you're still on mute, by the way. Because look, I mean, Redbeard, I agree with you. I mean, where did that tech come from? See, you know, going back all the way to David's.
Yeah, I just don't know.
You know, Blackbeard, did we somehow really acquire it? But then more sinister powers, aka, you know, large, huge corporations and the people who know they're going to be working for them. Again, think, you know, WF and all these other things. And then, you know, they get their hands on it, and you think it's really your government, but it becomes such special access program. It's so classified with, you don't even know that you're not even working for the government at that point. Now,
and I think it does fall in that area of, you know, like what was suggested, like corporations, right? So it's like, you think of everything there, it does kind of add up. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear what everybody has to say.
All right, Paul, so why don't you go into that first?
Okay, so from what Redbeard said, I'm on both sides, right? No physicist has ever admitted, astrophysicist, that a black hole exists. They have no proof that a black hole exists, right? That's the negative part. Second, can we create that? I have no doubt, right? So am I denying the existence of a black hole? No. But I'm saying there's no proof of it as of this point. When it comes to the secondary point of, you know, to lead on to Blackbeard, you know, we had Clinton versus Trump, right? If somebody was going to expose this, we would think Bill Clinton would have, right? But maybe there was some money to be made there. And we know the Bushes wouldn't have, and not to say that they weren't CIA linked, but not to put that there, but, you know, they weren't going to expose that. So then you go to Trump. If anybody was going to expose it, it would have been Trump. Okay. So everybody else is compromised for one reason or another, but there's no way. Now, as far as transitioning to Blackbeard, right now I'm seeing the people that are making the most effort are capitalists, right? We got Bezos, he's got rockets that look like whatever's, and you know, we have Musk that, so these are all private. So Blackbeard got a great point, and I'd love to hear his elaboration on Blackbeard's question, and then that.
Yeah. Well, we'll elaborate that, but just to kind of go in there, it's Bezos and the guy from Virgin Records. What is that guy's name? When you're on the civilian rocket side, Bronson, right? Isn't that Bronson? Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think because I don't know if Musk is. Well, no. What am I talking about? Yeah. He's playing a huge role in that too. Yeah. So to your point, Paul, I mean, there's at least 3 really powerful and wealthy and influential individuals, who are out there trying to do their own, privatized space program,
And mind you, this is in Switzerland too. And in Switzerland, I feel is kind of that one area in the world to where everybody can kind of go and like, whether it's money or whatever the case is, like Switzerland is like its own little black hole, right? So it's like, oh, we can get away with doing shit over here and nobody's going to question it. So
we're neutral. We're neutral, baby. We're neutral.
So Paul, you make a really good point though, about like, we don't even know, like, and that's why I brought it up. So I'm very curious to hear what Blackbeard has to say.
Yeah. And so on that note, well, Paul, rebuttal or any final comments?
No, I'm in agreement with Redbeard, and I share the laughs with DB. So we're good.
All right, Blackbeard. I think we just threw enough out there that you've got a lot to kind of chew on and comment.
I'm not sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sorry at all. Go ahead, sir.
I'm not offended at all. I mean, it's.
Oh no, I'm just thinking there's a lot of fodder for you to respond to. However you want to go. Wherever you want to go with it.
I mean. Well, I guess I'll touch on the private aspect of it again, just briefly. I would say, it's alleged, okay, and you look this up and make of it what you will, but it's alleged that Ben Rich, the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, said that, and this was years and years ago, I think decades ago, he said, we have the technology to take ET home. And so, and then you have
that interview. He said that in a filmed interview, didn't he?
Yeah. And then if you look at, like, for example, and I don't know that he's how truthful he is, but he seems truthful to me, and that doesn't mean he is, but I'd say, like, the testimony of Bob Lazar back in the 80s, he was talking about the reverse engineering of craft. Stan Deyo says that he was recruited by Dr. Edward Teller in Texas and taken over to an underground facility at Pine Gap in Australia to work on reverse engineering craft and establishing the zero-point energy technology. Again, these are testimonies, so that's hearsay. Doesn't mean it's true, but people have been talking about this for a lot longer than what we're seeing in Congress now. It's frankly old news what they're talking about there. What were some of the other topics?
Well, there was a lot there to unpack, but Redbeard, do you want to throw one in there? Because otherwise,
just basically, like, I'm kind of curious to hear what your opinion is on like the whole CERN facility in Switzerland, because it's like, it's nobody really knows a whole lot about it other than what they tell us, and who knows if what they tell us is even true.
Hey, Blackbeard, before we respond to that, so just so everybody understands, this was part of our pregame. So we want to kind of shape this. So, like, there's some things about Nikola Tesla, there's CERN. It's really just it's a much bigger conversation than just UFOs. I mean, there's a lot of, and again, we could go down rabbit holes whether this is some people argue that these are actually humans, so that it's time travel or it's interdimensional travel. So there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down here. So just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, Blackbeard, if you want to address Redbeard's thing on CERN, because I think that still does fold into everything that Paul was saying. And then to David's point, I mean, like, you need proof. I mean, like, well, they're trying to make, like, no one, and I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, but from what my understanding is, and no one actually knows what'll happen if this thing really actually works. Right. We don't know what's going to happen.
You get the doom guy.
Yeah. Blackbeard, all you.
Okay. Yeah. So, what I would say is that I guess I'll touch briefly on CERN, and then I'll just give you the caveat that is a deeper well, I think, than maybe is fully appreciated. Okay. So, I believe there's another large hadron collider in Canada. But the one in CERN, I would just say there was video of some individuals outside the courtyard around the statue of Shiva, which is the Hindu goddess of destruction, performing a ritual. And I would just say that to understand the UFO phenomenon, which I'm not even sure is possible, but to understand it in any measure of depth, you have to study the occult. And I'll just tell you, that's a dangerous journey, and it isn't for everybody.
Well, I'm
Ooh,
glad you just said that
spicy.
because I didn't know
Yeah.
you were going to do that. But that's the weirdest thing about CERN for me is the association. It's literally the other side of the
Yeah.
coin. It's science. Then why are you doing all this weird pagan ritual shit? Outside? Yeah.
That's spicy.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to spend a couple seconds talking about that whole ufology? Yet
I think it might be good. I think it might be good to just address this too, is like extraterrestrial. Like, how do you even define that term? What does that mean? You know, because there's the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is the idea that some kind of like Richard Dawkins had put forth, that there are biological entities which came about by some form of Darwinian process on another planet, developed technology, and now they've got stellar travel and they've arrived on planet Earth. And that's one theory. And then you have men like Jacques Vallée, who really helped bring to the forefront, I think back in the 60s or 70s, he wrote a book called Passport to Magonia and another one called Messengers of Deception, in which he put forth what's called the interdimensional hypothesis, which is very popular as well, because there are elements of the phenomenon that seem to defy traditional physics and things like that. So what do we mean when we say extraterrestrial? Well, terrestrial is like terra firma, or the earth, and extra means beyond. And so literally, technically, anything which is from beyond the earth, whether that be from a parallel plane of reality or from another planet or for both, or for some concept that we don't even have a framework for, technically, like, all those things are extraterrestrial.
No, and that's a great point. And I think that's what makes, I mean, I don't want to say, I hate to say it, that's what makes this such an interesting conversation, because I don't know what I don't know. Is it little green men from Mars within our solar system? Is it somebody who's traveling from, I used to know this. What's the closest planet again? The closest star. It's
I think it's Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, Centauri. Yeah. So, but what? How many light years? That's at least like what, 15 or 50 light.
It would take a while with a rocket.
Yeah,
That's
right.
no big deal.
Yeah, with our technology. I mean, legit, something that we just launched in the 70s. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I think just last year or the year before, it finally, or it's about to leave the edge of our solar system, right?
Ooh.
So we're not even, to Blackbeard's point, we don't even know what the hell we're even talking about or discussing in essence. I mean, really, there's just so many possibilities here. Now, David, non-suspicious guy, how does that make you feel? I mean, like, we're basically postulating that we're really just talking about things, and there's people who are a hell of a lot smarter than any of us, and they can't even figure this out. So how do we know what to say then, sir?
Well, it seems to be that's the beauty of it. We're having the conversation. We're hypothesizing and theorizing and coming up with some way to explain all this, unknown, all the things that we can't explain. And rather than just say, not to attack myself, but rather than just say our government's just too incompetent, it must be something else, we're at least saying, what is that something else? What can possibly be explained by what we're doing? How do we have the technology that we have? Like, all these pieces of information, that's the best part. It's a conversation that we could talk about and we could think about, and we could try and dig in to figure out what the truth is somewhere in there. A lot of that is way above my simple mind, but it's brilliant, and I love the conversation.
Blackbeard, continue on, sir. I think we just kind of left you a lot more room to expound upon, because you just addressed like the one part of that original conversation. Yep. Can you give us a little bit more to digest here, sir?
I would just say that everybody has a framework through which they view the world, right? That's our worldview, is what they call it. And I wouldn't say it was entirely, but certainly since the Enlightenment, it's been a very materialistic based worldview, where we say matter is the summation of all things. And so anything beyond that is, something that we'll dismiss because it can't be proven, or it's. But if you look at the history, and this doesn't mean it's right, but I think it is right, okay, especially from my own personal experience. I'm not a philosophical materialist. I don't think for one second that the material world is all that exists. And that kind of informs the view that I look at these things through, because it's such a deep well to go into. But I would just say that, everything that we perceive is a construction of our mind. So even you hearing my voice at this time and seeing my face through the camera, it's all your brain formulating that, because that's what it's structured to do. But suppose that there is information or realities, just like microwaves, outside of what our brain has is encoded to deconstruct, to create a picture or a form from, or some kind of tactile sensory experience. From our point of observation, anything that's outside of what it can do doesn't exist. But it doesn't therefore, stand that therefore it doesn't exist objectively. It just means from our point of observation, it doesn't exist. And so people see these crafts, pop in and out of reality, but really what they're viewing is the construction of their mind. And insofar as these craft, or whether it's technology or something more ephemeral than that, insofar as they have the capability of extending their presence outside of that construct of our mind, then from our point of observation, they're just disappearing, they're popping in, things like that. And, if you want to go to like the nuts and bolts of it, I'm really more interested in the kind of woo aspects of it personally. But as far as the nuts and bolts are concerned, again, going back to Bob Lazar, he talked about reverse engineering the craft. He said that the engines were produced with something called unobtainium, which I think is like ironically an appropriate name. Because but he says basically what it does is it creates like a gravity well or something. And he said because of a plasma field that's generated around the craft, that's why they emit the glowing light. I don't know that that's true. This is what he's said, but there are like plausible explanations for some of this, because this is, I think, where we're at. This is the truth of it. And this is why we're having this conversation. Maybe it's just because, we all share an interest in it. But I think what it is that even though we've been primed for this stuff through media for decades easily, we're reaching a point now, I think, where we're no longer going to have the privilege of not forming our own worldview, however lightly we might hold it, about this phenomenon, because it's pushing so much deeper and more overtly into the public consciousness.
So I kind of just I don't want to sidebar. So I'm about to almost break one of my own rules. So I got to be careful here. But one of the things that you said, Blackbeard, that I really like, because I personally think it applies to so much more around us, is that we all, so these, I call these my Mark IV eyeballs, my nose, my ears, my fingers, like these are my sensory organs. And my brain interprets them how I see it. And I think, to Blackbeard's point, that, we all could see something very different. I mean, just think about color blindness, or think about like, something might smell horrible to you and might smell great to somebody else. We all interpret the data that, our intelligence, again, these are intelligence or sensory, reconnaissance type of, organs. And we take that information and we interpret that intelligence, and then we come with an output. But I think the key thing here, what I'm really trying to get at, is like, but therefore we have to have good common language so we can then properly explain to one another what it is we're seeing, or what it is we're smelling, what it is we're feeling. And we have to be able to do so in such a way that the other person, even though they're a completely different person, at least there's a baseline and we have some place of understanding. And so this is where I'm being careful. I don't want to get us into a conversation about linguistics, because I think that's being taken away from us now, because, well, if we don't have that, then we don't have commonality, and then now we just have confusion. So I am seriously trying to tie that into this conversation, because I think that's kind of, if you and I can't agree with what this thing is flying through the air, like, well, what did you even see? Well, you just saw a glint of sunlight off of a plane. Well, no, that's not how my eyes interpreted what I saw. There's just so many nuances to this issue, this subject. I find all of them fascinating. So I don't want to take us too far down that rabbit hole, but I just wanted to throw that out there, because I think it kind of goes into what David's saying. David's interpretation is his interpretation. Mine's slightly different. Like, doesn't mean he's wrong. Doesn't mean he's right. Just that's his interpretation. We have to be able, though, to objectively state these. We have to be able to state our observations or the occurrences, and we have to do so in the most factual and clear and concise ways we possibly can. And that is being stolen from us right now. Just look around society. You know what I'm talking about, everybody. So, but I want to keep this focus on UFOs and UAP. So on that note, does anybody have a response for Blackbeard so far?
I do. Go ahead,
Paul?
Go ahead, Redbeard. No, you first.
Well, Redbeard's here, but I want to give Dave some time because I know he's got to bounce, and then you too, Paul. So, but DB, what do you got for that? Does that change your worldview at all, or does that make a little bit more sense? And again, we're not trying to change anyone's perspective of whether UFOs exist or don't exist, as Redbeard and I have always been trying to do. We're just trying to have a conversation to get people to start thinking about it a little bit more openly and differently. That's all.
All I have is that extraordinary evidence that I talk about. It's going to come down to, our mass shared experience as a people. Lots of people witnessing the same exact thing to where it's being recorded. It's undeniable. In that shared experience, whether we could explain it or not is irrelevant. As long as it's a shared experience that it's recorded, then the conversations start, evolving to what's next, right? If it is something popping in and out of the dimensions, as Blackbeard kind of described, I did a horrible job of describing how you were describing it. But it's a shared experience, and the more of those shared experiences we have, and the more conversations that are had, the thing that I like about these hearings is it's no longer just for the, dare I say, the crazies to be talking about this. The people who, over back in the 80s, if you were talking about UFOs, everyone was like, okay, that guy's a little crazy, or he's now we're having congressional hearings. Senators and congressmen or whoever is asking questions of government witnesses, and not even a low-level government witness, but a high-level government witness, like these kind of things. It's becoming more normal to talk about it to where we could investigate it as a society. Maybe more people have experienced one of these phenomena, but since it's so shunned by society, everybody just keeps their mouth shut and been like, I want nothing to do with that. But as it becomes normal to talk about conversations like these, conversations in front of a congressional hearing, more people will come forward because they're not going to lose their job or be shunned by society or looked at as some, crazy dude. Now it's becoming normal to have that conversation, which I think is the beginning of the scientific process, is allowing people to question, allowing people to theorize and hypothesize without being shunned by society at large. So, I do see all this as exceptionally good. The fact that we're talking about it at a governmental level, even if I think the direction of the government side of it is kind of wacky, because have I mentioned the incompetent government yet? Like, I know I have to have a quota, and
I think you've got 3 more references in this podcast.
that we're allowing it to become, we're normalizing the conversation. We're making it socially acceptable to actually debate the issue. That's good for all of us. It's good for the process. It's good for discovering what actually is going on. Because instead of being afraid of talking about it, we could dig into the issue deeper by trying to think, what actually did I see, rather than, oh no, I didn't see anything. Nope, not me. Put your head down.
You're not going to be accused of being a witch. And like, if she floats, she's a witch. If she sinks, she's a witch. You're not going to be. Yeah. So that's a great point. It is more publicly acceptable to have these conversations, even in public amongst your friends. Blackbeard, you were saying it, you had some people who've divulged some things to you, and they're very reticent to do so. They're very cautious, like, oh, I don't want to say this. I might lose my job, or I might be, and I think, to David's point, we are starting to see a lot more individuals. Now, I'm not going to lie. That also makes me a little circumspect too, because we've been busted on this before. If you're into this, and if you follow this, if you're part of that kind of UFO community, there's been a lot of quote unquote whistleblowers who it's come out where, like, no, they were just nothing more than government plants to seed confusion and sway the conversation. So before we come back to Blackbeard, Paul, I know you seemed like you wanted to say something.
I have 3 pages worth of notes, man.
Oh my God.
So
All right.
when
Hang on, real quickly. Are they your
Yeah.
notes or are they your wife's notes? Because she's the
they,
one.
I've been writing in.
Okay.
Although
Ooh.
I do have an earpiece in.
Okay.
Okay.
She's in the back room saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, gotcha.
She's in the back. So to address the latest thing, the hearings are obviously political. I would say 2 of the 3 I would listen to. One, it was so obvious. Who cares about his social status? Why would they announce that before he testifies? Okay, that's just ridiculous. So that automatically makes me think that somebody's trying to pull one over on us. The other 2 guys, I thought they I'm starting to, I'm listening to them. I'm not listening to that guy. Okay, he was just absolutely, I don't know. It was a red flag for me. I'll leave it at that for now because everything else I have is on a different part of that. But Mark, do you have anything that you want me to?
Well, I think we'll keep it on you for a second. My only comment on that is to, here, I'll bring it full screen for everybody. And maybe we can just all of us briefly chime in because David actually has a background in this as well. Like, so we're talking deception indicated. We don't have a baseline. You really got to, there's a lot more to this than you're like, oh, he looks down until there's more to that than looking at reading body language. But I do agree with what you just said. There were some things in that testimony. And I probably watched about 15 minutes and I was like, oh, I just don't know about this. Other things were a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Like, again, I saw that guy in the gallery and I'm just like, oh, now, and that could just be me. Like, I'm going to admit my bias. Maybe I just don't like that guy. So every time I see him, I'm associating with what's being spoken in a negative context. But then as I bring this over to David, but I think then Paul, we got to come back to you and then over to Blackbeard. But my final thing would be, is that, but there is something to be said for body language and deception indicated. And I'll just throw this out there for anybody who's watching. Jack over at Black Scout Survival, a friend of mine, he does some really good videos and he actually talked about this kind of subject. So I'm happy you brought that up, or I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because don't just listen to us, go listen to other people. There's other people talking about exactly what Paul just said and who aren't idiots, right? To Blackbeard's perspective, maybe we all see things a little bit differently, our worldview, right? But that doesn't mean you should discount it. But I want to come over to David. I don't know if you saw any of the testimony, David, but do you want to weigh in from that former non-suspicious persona on what you saw, or just on how to again, if a guy looks and sounds like a used car salesman, he's probably a used car salesman,
Human nature, man. Like, you get in front of people, you have to have an agenda. We might not know what his agenda is. I know nothing about it. I didn't watch any of it, to be honest. But I go back to my previous point a couple points ago. He didn't present extraordinary evidence anyways. But going back to my most recent point, at least we're talking about it. Whether that guy's a nut job, whether that guy's trying to get the movie deal or the movie rights, he's going about it wrong. But if that's the way he wants to do it, I think it's still good, whether that guy doesn't mean anything or not. But the fact that he's there, the societal benefit is going to exist long past whatever story he's telling, whatever thing he's selling. We're having the conversation. And yeah, it probably is political. Everything's political. I get it. But, going back to the other side of it, I think at least we're having that conversation, whether that guy's legit or not, he didn't provide the extraordinary evidence, that we're looking for, but at least we're having that conversation to get us closer to seeing that there might be evidence somewhere out there and we're just ignoring it because it's societally accepted to ignore anything UFO related as crazy.
Anybody want to make a direct comment to Dave? Otherwise, we're going to come back to Paul.
I just want to make it clear. I agree.
I was going to bring it back over to you. You had 2 more points to make.
But
I just want to see if anybody else has a rebuttal to Dave.
No, I agree with Dave on that. I'm glad people are talking about it. It was just that all the stuff that was put in the media is what set me off there, and I thought that was a red flag for me. But anybody that's willing to talk and open up the conversation, I'm all there. I'm for it.
Yeah, David, I think that was an awesome point. I mean, at least we're finally having the conversation, and we're actually being able to do so openly. Whether it's a farce, whether it's being, I mean, again, just take the victories where you can get them. At least we're talking about it, right? And then because that's compelling the five of us to be sitting here right now,
Right.
on Thursday night having this conversation. So, Redbeard, Blackbeard. Before we come back to Paul, because I know he still had one or two more points. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Is this even at least beneficial that we're talking about this now, or what do you guys think?
You want to go, Blackbeard?
Sure.
Okay, you're the
Sure.
guest, Blackbeard. Come on in.
Okay. Well, I don't want to be rude. I would say.
Oh no, don't worry, Redbeard. He's the rude one. You're
Is it good that we're talking about it? Well, it's better than not talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's more to say than that? I mean, yeah, I think that's, obviously true. I would just say that I would say a couple of things. I would say as far as extraordinary evidence is concerned, we have to keep in mind the difference between evidence and proof. And we have to decide for ourselves what is a sufficient level of evidence that we're persuaded to the reality of something or not, because that can vary. Like, for example, with a lot of phenomenon, I would take merely sufficient evidence or evidence that was quite frankly mundane but pointed in that direction. That's another thing I would add to my column that says, well, there might be something to this. But that to say, everybody wants to see the smoking gun, of course. I mean, that would be amazing and dramatic and awesome, and But for me, my bar for the acceptance of something isn't quite so high. And then what was the other topic?
Just before you go any further, you just made me remember something. Look, the absence of evidence isn't proof of absence. It doesn't work that way. Just because we don't have the smoking gun, just because we don't have a Sasquatch alive or a skeleton, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's not how that's not how logic works. So sorry, you just made me remember that, Blackbeard. Continue, sir.
Yeah, there was something else that he said though. I'm trying to remember exactly. Can you? Because I know I had something to say about it.
Dave, you were talking about, again, the preponderance of evidence, that large smoking gun. You were making that comment, or are you talking about what Paul was saying? Because Paul started this off.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah.
All right. Well, then we come back over to Paul, because Paul, you still had 2 pages at least of more things to.
Now I have more. I don't know. So what I would like to say is, evidence versus proof. Proof is going to be an absolute, right? We have an absolute there. And evidence means there might be some stuff. So maybe we don't trust that picture of Sasquatch, that we saw decades ago when I was a child.
Patterson Gimli.
Evidence.
Patterson Gimli.
It's not proof.
It's evidence.
Yeah.
It's evidence.
I just wanted to agree with Blackbeard on that there is a big difference. So we don't necessarily need absolute proof. We can have some evidence here. And most of it isn't public to us. And other than, shiny things in the sky, which in my mind, it looks weird. I'm not going to doubt that. But I'm still a skeptic to this point. But
just right there, just for the audience. So you guys are awesome. You made me just think of something. So to the point you just made, evidence versus proof. So you see something shining in the sky. Okay, that's evidence, but that's not necessarily proof. I look at a 1380 tapestry, and there's appears to be a guy riding a spaceship in the sky. Okay, that doesn't mean that there were spaceships back there, right? I'm serious. The very first time, which was I think 2 years ago or a year ago, I saw Skylink going through the sky. I had no idea what the F that was, because I'd never seen the Skylink satellites. And at first I was like, what the hell is that? Right. So that could have been used as evidence, to your point, but that isn't proof. That, because after further research, you realize it was just Elon Musk with a bunch of satellites being dropped off around low Earth orbit. And I just happened to be lucky enough to see it. So to your point, and again, that tapestry, I always love that. It is weird. It's evidence. It's evidence of something. It's either evidence that we thought about things different, back then. And maybe that was our artistic expression of angels, or I have no idea how to interpret that, but it is kind of also evidence but that is a guy in some type of saucer flying in the sky. That does look a little bit weird. So
it could be evidence of fraud.
Yep. All right, continue, sir.
I was going to say that could be evidence of fraud too. There's plenty of people out there that would, if it's in a cave somewhere, okay, that's a different story. But even that, but who knows? And then we could get into carbon dating, and I don't want to go there at this point.
Well, and to your point, how do we interpret what people? How do we know how people interpreted things 400 or 500 or 600 years ago?
Yeah, and maybe there was time travel, or maybe there is time travel, and it occurred.
Well, or
and that's why they saw
society's
that.
changed.
It wasn't them.
Well, or just society's change. How we interpret things now is very different from just even 30 years ago. I mean, and I think you guys all know what I'm talking about. Do you think we would be having conversations about, just look at all the social issues that are taking place right now? 30 years ago, would you have foreseen this? No. So how would we have known, right? So again, I think David said to me once in a phone call, or maybe I'm confusing it with something else. History is going to look back upon us. I mean, how are we going to be judged? Americans, right? Or the Western world, even 200 or 300 years from now? How are we going to be judged by what's going on right now? I don't know, because I don't have a crystal ball, but isn't it possible that they're going to look back and wonder what type of disease beset humanity, that made us say and think and do the things that we're doing to each other right now? Possibly. I don't know.
Well, it depends on whether or not the futurists and their techno-utopian vision comes to fruition. And frankly, I think that they're kind of filled with hubris and pride, and they're probably not going to get it. But if they were to get it, if they are able to develop a machine that's capable of truly superhuman thought, then all bets are off the table, and humanity 200 years from now isn't relevant anymore, because we couldn't possibly conceptualize something that's actually smarter than us. My friend's dog does not understand anything even close to the level that I'm capable of, or you are capable of understanding. And so that's one of the challenges, actually, in trying to formulate a theory of mind regarding something that's truly extraterrestrial, and certainly something that appears to be more advanced, because the framework that we have is inherently human, and it's very difficult. I mean, look at the way we anthropomorphize even like cartoons, and children, play with plush dolls, and their dolls are talking, even though it's a bear or something. It's like, that's what we are. We are human. And so to really step outside on this cosmic level is really, it may be an exercise in vanity at the end of the day, honestly. I don't know.
Great point. No, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, I think that brings me into AI, and I don't want to go there yet, but maybe we can. I don't know. I think that, Mark, I'll let you decide on that point, because I want to, I think that branches off into AI. But
I think we should, honestly, on that, I think we if Blackbeard's willing, I think we should bring Blackbeard back in the future one, and we should do one on AI in the future. So Blackbeard, if you're okay with that, let's shelve that for now, because I want to still give you time to bring up Nikola Tesla, Paul.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to say is that in the previous conversations we've had is reverse engineering. I do believe there's a lot of reverse engineering going on between countries, between adversaries. Is any of it extraterrestrial? I don't know. I'm not there, but I guarantee you there's a ton of it going on between countries. So reverse engineering, when they use that term, I don't necessarily buy it. Okay. Second, Voyager 2, 45 years or plus, it's only 12 billion miles away. But what does that tell us? It tells us that there's no way in heck we're getting to another planet or anything else. But the good part is our technology was good in the 70s. And I'm going to open up a real big thing here. That makes the moon landing possible for those that doubt it. Because if we had this technology to have a device sent into space, and it's there for 45 some years, and it's billions of miles away, why couldn't we have used that technology, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8 years before, to get a man to the moon? Now, you might say, there's a picture where it says prop, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I believe, and this is personal opinion at this point, everything else has happened. That was probably a contingency plan, and the photo got thrown in there. There are thousands of people that saw the takeoff. Okay, there's, So, I mean, I'm really going off the rails here, but I just want to make sure that, we can debate the moon stuff and that, and again, but I just wanted to address that one point there. And then I can get into Tesla once, I settle down.
All right. Well, let's let everybody, because I had you full screen, but I could see everybody. Everybody was smiling when you were talking about that moon stuff. So I think we should give everybody a chance to. Looks like David's got something to say. I know I do. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have a link in this video now that you just brought that up. I think I've plugged him before in a different video, the Y files. I just saw one of the videos that he just did debating this was the moon landing real or not, and actually just trying to address some of the things that people are saying, and I'll put a link in. I won't be a spoiler, but so I saw everybody smiling at Paul's comments right there. Who wants to jump in? Again, we're talking UFOs, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about phenomenon that we don't understand is really what the question is. Dave, non-suspicious CIA guy, what do you got, sir? I saw you laughing.
This is easy. You could just rewind to the beginning of this podcast on my opinion on the government's ability to have a conspiracy. I mean, that's the top of them for me. That's all I got on that.
Are you saying that if it was a conspiracy, it would have been definitively leaked already?
Absolutely.
So
We're not that good.
Yeah. See, I agree. I hearken to the movie Capricorn 1. If we would have faked it, somebody would have leaked it. I agree with.
Soviets, they would have called BS. Somebody, like, everybody's out to get us or get one up on us or disrupt our society or do something. That's low-hanging fruit. If we didn't actually do it and I'm an enemy of America or I just want to, get a nice little cut in the society there, I share the evidence. They didn't make it.
So I do want to just throw my former CIA, this is what I used to do hat on. And I think, and David, again, not scripted, but David's absolutely right. Our enemies would have been doing everything possible, and they still are, and they're doing it to this day, of trying to recruit individuals to be penetrations into our most classified programs. And they would have been doing it initially, in my humble opinion, to try to gain access to that technology. And look, we're really good. The other guys aren't bad either, right? We've had some fiascos where we've had our asses handed to us on the intelligence in the intelligence arena. They would have probably had a penetration, and to David's point, they would have either had the technology necessary to duplicate it themselves, or they would have found out it was all faked. And if it was faked, my God, what a political coup that would have been. If you could have, you wouldn't have hid that information. You would have released that to the world and embarrassed America on the world stage as the biggest liars ever. And see, I see David laughing, right? So David, that was a damn good point, because I never thought about that until you just said that.
It's true. Once you do that, I mean, we're the CIA guys. You give us that edge, we're going to use that against you. That's the whole point, right? Yeah. We want to know somebody's secrets for one reason, to get the advantage, right? That's a great advantage someone would have over us if they could prove we never went to the moon.
Yeah, and to that point, I think this is an example of, because it would have been controlled by the government, and then it would have leaked like it would have been like a leaky ship. I think that information would have been leaked a long time ago, to tell the truth, or somebody would have recruited a spy inside of the network, had access to the information, and then released it to publicly humiliate America. But that's my bias. That's my perspective. This is what we used to do. So I agree with David on that one. Before we go too far down the rabbit hole, anybody want to respond to that kind of accusation or assumption or whatever statement out loud? Paul's laughing.
Yeah.
Blackbeard's just looking like, how did I sign up for this shit? What am I doing?
Sorry, I did go off the rails.
No, it was good. It was exactly.
It was fitting, but I went off the rails.
I do have something to say to that, actually.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm not going to comment on my own personal opinion on the moon landing, but I will say that Richard Hoagland wrote a book called Dark Mission, where he believes that not only did we go to the moon, but that NASA is airbrushing extraterrestrial structures which have been present and are present on the moon from their photographs.
I'm so high-fiving you. I didn't have us in them. Yeah. I was hoping somebody would pick that up and run with it. You did not disappoint. That's a whole nother genre of just if you like if you're going to use modern technology, YouTube or whatever, where you watch videos, there are so many good videos and so many good conversations. And then, as you just said, there's so many good books, so many great minds who've written about this and talked about it. And that's a huge one right there, which is, oh no, it's real. We did it. But so now David and I putting our CIA officer hats on. If I found this thing that Blackbeard's alluding to, that other, well, not Blackbeard per se, but the people he's read, and it's actually proven, like, oh, hey, the real truth is there is alien life, and it's or there's alien structures, or we don't know what, but there's something else there in the dark side or other parts. Well, then David and I would be like, okay, well, how do we discredit anybody even talking about that? Well, why don't we just do another program where we just actually even make it seem like we never even went to the moon? You see what I'm kind of getting at? That's exactly how we would strategize this. That would be a solution on the table as a possible outcome to take away and avert people's thoughts and glances from what Blackbeard just said. I don't want people talking about that. So instead, let's just focus on people saying that we never even went there to begin with. That's exactly what we would do.
That point, our government's, dare I say this, they're actually very good at drawing attention to something else. They're doing something over here. They're okay with the talk over here. And I think UFOs, to take it back a little bit, UFOs were at some point in the 50s and 60s, kind of that conversation was encouraged because it was just weird for society to talk about those things. But as long as we got a group of society talking about UFOs and everybody society discrediting them, over here we could create this advanced aircraft, this advanced technology, and no one's going to think anything of it. It's just going to look like UFOs. We're going to acknowledge that there's all these guys talking about UFOs. It's like look the other way, misdirection, classic, tactics. But I think the government's really good at that. And we could go to virtually every piece of major news over the last many decades where the government has allowed certain conversations to continue while they're doing something else behind the scenes. And as long as people are looking over here, they're not looking over here to what we're actually doing. And I could use examples that you and I were both involved in, but I don't want them to take down the podcast. So
it's all good. They're already limiting, our YouTube, yeah, whatever. Anyway, that's another story right there.
But you know what I mean? Like it's not so much conspiracy. It's more letting society do what they do. And as long as society's looking over here, we could do this over here. Yep. And we're fine with them having those conversations. We're not even going to stop them because we want to encourage it a little bit more so we could get away with what we're doing over here. And that's about as conspiratorial as I get when the government's competency is in question.
Well, I'll just throw this out there for the final kind of thoughts. We're at an hour and 15 minutes and maybe start kind of wrapping this up. Because honestly, fellas, we could sit and talk about this for 3 hours. But to David, your last point, and I'm throwing this out there for everyone to kind of either digest and either address or go in your own direction for your final comments. But to David's point, I mean, that goes into everything from the hollow earth to, the moon landing. That is exactly how these type of operations work. I mean, to David's point, I think David just nailed it. And you could apply that. And I think once you start seeing it from that perspective or realizing that this is a possibility, you actually, when you take a step back, you start seeing things through a different lens. Like it kind of changes your perspective to some extent. That's how I feel about it anyway. I'm not going to try to control this. We're near the end. I mean, I want to give Blackbeard some time, but Redbeard, you haven't really said much. Does anybody have a direct comment to what David and I were just postulating, or do you want to go in your own direction for, the
just
next
a thumbs up?
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I do got to jump off.
Yeah.
I got to take the kid to football practice. It's that part of the season, but I love this topic. I mean, I'm not as evolved on it as understanding all the nuance to what's going on. But like I said, I want to believe, I want to see it. I want to see the evidence. I want to be part of that history altering, life altering event. Like how cool would that be? And, I'm not on the side of thinking aliens are coming here to invade. I'm more on the side of aliens would come here to contribute. And that's probably just my positive way of seeing the world. But that's what excites me about the topic in general. That's why I love the conversation. But government's inept. Like, is that my last one?
No, you actually still had one more to throw out there. You had one more to throw out there. So you can add that to your quota for next time.
Yes.
Well,
but it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Blackbeard, dude, I love your stuff. I want to watch anything you're talking about because you're operating on another level as far as I'm just the government guy. You know, I'm only on the show to dispel government truths. I'm the plant. That's it. But
hey, well, yeah. David, thanks. We're going to have to, we'll sit and
appreciate it, bud.
Yeah. We'll talk to everybody and we'll figure out, because we do have to do this again. And maybe, you know, I know Redbeard, I don't want to speak for him, but I know he feels the same way. We really do want to talk about cryptids and phenomenon and all these are subjects that are of great interest to us. So yeah, we'll do this again. David, seriously, my hat's off to you, sir. I hope you guys have a great night, you know, with football.
Cheers, bud.
Thanks for taking the time out of your busy life to join us again. You are a great man, Charlie Brown. Seriously.
Anytime. Catch you guys later.
All right. We'll see you later, David. Thank you, sir. All right. I think
this is a great view, by the way.
This is actually pretty good. Yeah,
not to totally be random, but this view really works out good.
Well, maybe we should limit it to 4 next time because this is a pretty cool view.
Hey,
with your permission, let's kind of turn the next 10 to 15 minutes over to Paul and Blackbeard. And if you guys are okay with that, again, we always say train to standards, not to time, but we also got to be realistic. If this is because we really could do this for 3 hours. There's no doubt about it. But I think honestly, we should just say, yeah, we're going to do this again, and whether it's a follow up on this subject or maybe this is just it's the UFO topic. 1 out of 10 times we talk about and whatever comes up. But I think Redbeard, with your permission, let Paul and Blackbeard dominate the conversation here for the next at least 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll.
I just have one slightly oddest / schizo thing to.
But as long as it's schizo, then we can do it.
Yeah, no. So, and I'm curious to kind of see where you guys go with this, but I don't know if anybody else has kind of experienced this, and I can only go based off of my own experience. And Mark, I don't even know if I brought this up to you, but I've had certain moments over the course of, I don't know, probably the last couple of years, more significantly than others, but whether it's like so. Basically almost like a tear or like a rift in time, and I'm gonna elaborate on this so I can get an appropriate response.
Blackbeard's already shaking his head yes and no. Blackbeard's already picking up what you're putting down.
And I'm gonna prime it good for you, bud. So that was super Minnesotan, by the way. Fucking hell. But so one example in particular. My dad and I were driving, we took my truck, we were running errands and whatnot, and we came to a stop sign. I mean, a stop sign that like we've been to thousands of times, right? Like we know the traffic. And when you look both ways, you can clearly 100% see both ways. Like, if there's something coming or not. And I was good on the left. I was good on the right. I go to take my left-hand turn, and as I go out, I double check just to make sure, and nothing was coming. And friggin' before we knew it, I looked over again, and I'm like, dude, where the hell did that red truck come from? To give frame of reference, you can see a mile down the other way. There's nowhere in the area that it started coming from there's no driveway. There's nowhere it would have come from. Like, you're not going to just come out of the woods, right? This is a semi-residential area. And I'm like, dude, there's no way that truck came from all the way down off of the right-hand side in that amount of time. Because that person would have had to have been going like 60, 70, right? And I was like, okay, this is kind of a one-off. And then as time went on, there were certain days to where you could swear that, you know, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this in like, you know, this is 15 minutes. You kind of have a regimen of time that, you know, is taking place. And I started asking my dad as time went on, I'm like, dude, like, have you not had time to where, or times to where like all of a sudden a block of time is totally gone and there's no explanation for it whatsoever? Based off of my personal experiences, 100%, I think there's tears and rips in time. And unless it like actually happens in a semi-significant way the first time, like I don't think you notice it until it happens that way. And so it's freaking me out a little bit because it's like, okay, like you hear about this stuff, but then it's like, I truly believe, based off of my experiences, that we have tears in time, because there's no way 10 minutes just disappears. Like I would tend to think that we're all fairly competent cognitive people, right? And it's like, you would know, we have a general idea of what the lapsing of time is. And when you're like, okay, I have to be somewhere and I have to leave my house at 10:15, it's 10 o'clock now, and all you're doing is brushing your teeth. It's a 2-minute activity and it's 10:10. You're like, dude, there's no way that that 10 minutes has elapsed. So what say you guys? Like, I firmly believe that time rips or time rifts happen. I really do.
Yeah, I have, and I can see that Blackbeard's taking notes. So I'm going to go ahead and start.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there have been times when I've been driving and, you know, I'm here and then all of a sudden I'm there. And I thought, you know, it's just a mind lapse or something.
Right.
But one thing that really resonates with what you said, Redbeard, is when I was doing driver's ed, and again, this is a long time ago, I was going to the next student's pickup and we were turning left on a road and it was turning left into her driveway. And I started turning and the instructor hit the brakes and said, "How did you not see that red car coming?" And
oh,
dude,
you're
I
scheming
don't
me
know
out.
how that red car got there.
You are scheming me out right now.
I'm serious. And to this day, I do not believe that I missed that red car.
Oh.
And I have no explanation. But how could I have missed it? It was a left-hand turn on a straight road.
Yeah,
no
where
way.
You can see you have clear sight lines. Like, there's no way you would have missed that.
No way I would have missed that.
It skeeves me out that was a red vehicle for you.
Well, yeah, that was kind of weird. You guys both referenced it as a red vehicle.
Dude.
I mean, look. I'm trying to be the devil's advocate. Maybe it's like a color thing. I mean, you know, I'm not even. You know, again, somebody might try to present, you know, like, well, maybe it's an optical, and by optical I mean your eyes and the color. You know, maybe there's something to be said that. But before we turn over to Blackbeard, you know, I don't want to be so cheesy as to reference the Matrix, but I mean, we don't know what we don't know, right? So Blackbeard, he's smiling over there. He's wondering how in the F he got himself involved in this podcast. All right, go ahead, sir. I know you got something to say.
I do. I have a few things to say. You know, time is an interesting topic. The prevailing view of physicists, as I understand it now, is that time travel into the future is possible. Time travel into the past is not possible. I don't know that I buy that, but that I'm sure they have very good reasons, many equations to enumerate why that would be. But I will say that, you know, is bringing it back to UFOs in a related matter, is that it's textbook for an abductee to have what's called missing time, which is to say, I was driving down the road and it was 2 p.m, and the next thing I knew I was pulling in my driveway and the sun was setting, and it's like, what happened? And so it relates to our memory, at least in that context. I still think that you may be right that there could very well be like rifts in space-time. In fact, you know, a lot of the theoretical proposals for how the UFOs are flying is that they are creating something like an Einstein-Rosen bridge or gravity wells that warp space-time. And of course, space and time, the faster you go, the slower time is, right? Well, so they're directly interrelated.
Couldn't it also, just real quickly, but couldn't it also be postulated that if a vehicle of that nature was anywhere near. Yeah, I think. Yeah, thank you. Yep. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it could go right through, but it's also this sense that if I'm manipulating space, I am by definition manipulating time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. 100%.
Well,
That makes you a time traveler.
Yeah. And is there just like anything? I mean, electricity, even what we're talking about, every one of these devices is bleeding electricity all around us, right? So, you know, at these levels, it's minimal, but a different technology. And if it's something to what you just said, Blackbeard, how do we know that that bleed off isn't the residual isn't enough where somebody comes into that slipstream and experiences what Redbeard and Paul just said? Suddenly there's a red vehicle out of nowhere. Where there 2 seconds ago, I'm looking down a road a mile. I can see a mile and I didn't see anything. And all of a sudden there's a vehicle. I don't know. Just throwing that out there. It's a possibility.
A lot of these UFOs too are allegedly only visible under infrared, which is something that is too expensive for my blood. But if you guys have any of that, maybe you can point it up there and have a look. I think there are also naturally thin spots. You know, people talk about areas like the Bermuda Triangle. I think Mount Shasta is a thin spot. A lot of the ancient megalithic structures were constructed on those kind of areas. So, I mean, listen, the world is far stranger, I think, than maybe we appreciate.
So if I may, real quick, and this might be reaching, and I really want to know what you, Blackbeard, and Paul actually have to say about this, and Mark, especially you too. But I did reference, you know, something like the Hadron Collider, and kind of, you know, that what that messes around with, which is it's a particulate accelerator. If you have people that are messing with particles with something of that scale, and you know, allegedly, you know, they, you know, and Paul, to your point, like we don't know what we don't know as it pertains to black holes. Like, you know, it's one of those things to where, like, if they're trying to, like, for whatever reason, tear something like that open, is it possible that the byproduct of this also is creating rifts, like almost like waves, to where somebody might experience this way sooner than us, but at some point those waves, as a result of this collider, look, if there's one in Canada, as you suggested too, Blackbeard, if we have two of these things going off at the same time, or even at different times, that one being closer to us, I mean, what is the byproduct of that? I mean, could that be a byproduct? And so I know this is kind of getting semi away from it, but it does feed back into the general conversation. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Paul, Blackbeard, who wants to take that first? Paul, you're on mute still.
Yep.
Therefore, you get it because you were on mute.
Yeah, Blackbeard goes because. Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely believe that. Yeah. You know, while I have my doubts because there's no proof of black holes and stuff.
Yep.
But any kind of other, I'm absolutely concerned about what you said, and I think that we can have an impact to the point where it could be an issue. I don't mean to be so generalized, but that's just my thought. I think we can do something that will impact something that may have never existed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add in. I'm going to chime in before I turn it over to Blackbeard here for kind of the closing comments here. But I'll just say this: like, you know, when you think about waves, whether it's a radio wave, any type of energy wave, you know, S waves when it comes to earthquakes, you know, and then you have to think about the median through which these waves, whatever the energy is that's creating the wave, is traveling, whether it's through magma, water, rock, air. Again, radio waves are disrupted by water, hills, you know, vegetation. All these environmental factors have an impact on the medium, the wave, right? The energy that's so to what you guys are saying, whether it's a certain type of a facility we're dabbling things that we don't know about, or to Blackbeard, whether it's, you know, this type of travel, again, whether it's magnetic, whether who knows what the mechanism that is powering these quote unquote craft. We don't know how that's going to impact us as human beings in the environment. And that's all I was trying to say, for your guys' great stories.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's a car out of nowhere or a truck.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, did something else just happen and that resulting S wave? You see what I'm kind of getting at? Blackbeard, I saw you kind of nodding your head a while earlier. That's why I'm kind of bringing it up. I hope I'm giving you a good handoff, because hey, seriously, we're at an hour 35. Take as much time as you want to kind of address this. You're going to be kind of our closing comments here on, and then if you want type out, bring it all the way back into UFOs, UAPs.
Well, I guess I will bring up one that I think is interesting, like just some UFO stuff that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch on. But I will say, like a lot of people speculate that the Mandela effect may be a product of something like this. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all, because, how much do we really understand about the fundamental nature of the universe? They were looking for the God particle, which, sounds like hubris to me, but you just play with these forces. It's like, go read or watch any Michael Crichton novel or film that's ever been made. And it's like, we think we're so, you know what I'm saying? And then you go and you mess with the elemental forces in nature and all hell breaks loose. It's like, there's a message there, like, but we just can't help ourselves.
Hey, hello, humans. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? You don't want to fuck with that shit,
But see, the same incentive to develop this technology covertly is the same incentive to keep it quiet. It's the power of the asymmetry of information. Of course you're going to do it. You have to do it. If you're and it's game theory. You're gambited into it, because if you don't do it, and that's why they say it's like with the cloning and all these things. You're telling me we've had cloning technology since the 40s and we haven't cloned humans? Of course we have. Don't be naive, but but you're forced in. Somebody's got to do it, and you know that if you don't do it, then they're going to do it, and so we're in a bind. It's like, even though it's a bad idea, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? You have to.
I just got to throw this out there, and I'm so high-fiving you right now. I didn't know you were going to bring up game theory, but that's
awesome.
It's the prisoner's dilemma. That's what it is. It's the prisoner's dilemma of game theory right there. You don't know what the other guy's going to say or do, so most people, generally speaking, will go off and do it because they're unsure of what, So here, just in essence, all four of us were participants, or we observed whatever it is, but and we're all segregated, we're all separated, and we're in different cells. I don't know what Redbeard's going to say, Blackbeard's going to say, or Paul's going to say. The odds that all of us keep our mouth shut and don't ever say anything, it's totally not in your favor. Somebody's going to do things, and your brain starts getting in there and saying, well, I know Paul's going to probably say something, or Redbeard or Black. So therefore I better say something right now too. Otherwise I'll be the one holding the short end of the stick.
Right.
Game theory, prisoner's dilemma. So, so we didn't do this enough justice, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of stealing your thunder a little bit, but I really, really love your supposition about the civilian sector, Blackbeard, because I think, me personally, that's where I more tend towards that. I think somebody in the civilian sector has something, and they're just keeping it. And the people within the government still think they're working for the government, but they're actually working for some just evil consortium of sons of bitches. So
I feel like that's a more terrifying thing too, right? Like the fact, like, and it sounds weird because it's like a lot. Don't get me wrong, the government it's inept, but it's also to many degrees nefarious as fuck, right? But it's like the idea that you have corporations or groups of people, perhaps groups of people that are very cult-like, that have large swaths of wealth, time, and energy and manpower to put into these things, like the Hadron Collider, or other things, that we've been talking about this evening. It, like, to me, those like, it's limitless. There's no checks and balance whatsoever to that level of human endeavor. So obviously there's going to be this addictive need to have to keep pushing the envelope until we broach that or breach that level of self-destruction, I think. And it's like, at what point do you hit that realm of like, oh shit, we shouldn't have done that? Well, by that point, the die is cast, is it not? Like, if they do tear apart like even just a decent chunk of matter or particulate, that's going to change everything on this planet in a fairly decent way. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but it's the same thing with alien technology. I mean, if we have something that is so fundamentally like overwhelming in terms of technology or a truth or whatever, I mean, that it's going to change everything we know. So that to me is terrifying, and it gives a lot of credence to what you're saying too, Blackbeard. And Paul, you brought that up too in terms of the civilian sector, and like, yeah, like the private sector is, I think has a lot more power than people realize, and there's virtually no checks and balances to it other than morality. And I think those moral mouthpieces are the people that come out and try and talk about it, but the ability to actually put those people under as it pertains to the private sector is, I think, far higher, because you have unlimited resources. So and nobody's going to be like, oh, like, you know, this company that does like, you know, very public things, like they wouldn't do that, you know, like that's not who they are. Meanwhile, they're like like that one, there's this one guy who's just like straight to jail, you know, like, and nobody asks questions. And I see Mark and everybody laughing because you probably have seen that video with that guy that was interviewed for the government in this one country. Like, oh, so you did this, straight to jail. It's like, oh, this person's doing this. Well, I guess they're not going to be seen anymore, but we look good in the public purview. So I don't know.
Blackbeard, we kind of took us a little bit off in a different direction, but I want to come back to you, and I still want to give Paul a chance, but like, but the point, I mean, again, that we, you know, again, we kind of started, we went and diverged in a few different directions, but I still think we're on point. Like, so if you don't mind, sir, you know, conclude and finish up your comments right there. I don't think we distracted you too much.
What I would leave everyone with, especially since this kind of conversation was spurred on by the hearings, which again, I've only watched clips of. Frankly, I'm not all that interested in it, but as it pertains to the disclosure of any kind of like Fortean phenomenon, whether it's UFOs or cryptids or time travel or any of the mysteries that still remain, you know, now that we've explored the world, I would just say that it would behoove us to become adults about it, and I mean that in a very specific sense. I mean that whether or not these things are true is not dependent upon whether someone in a suit is sitting in a chair below somebody in a row with an official title saying, oh, it was true, and then it's like, oh, okay, it was true. It's like you are fully capable of thinking on your own and being your own person and an adult, and deciding for yourself whether or not you think it's true. And so long as we rely on the validation of authority figures, we'll always be at their mercy.
I really want the NSA guy to cut that clip, give it to us so we can do that as a short, because I think that just kind of was a freaking home run for all home runs out there.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That actually touched me on a personal level, seriously, Blackbeard, because Redbeard and I may not be the most articulate, but that's exactly emotionally speaking, that's what we're trying to accomplish here, is just to give it a medium, an outlet for people to start at least thinking that way of what you just said. Like, it isn't just all, you know, black and white. There's a lot of gray, and some things are black and white, but you got to think that through for yourself. So that was, in my opinion,
that's awesome.
That was like, hey, do you want to take over the podcast? I mean, seriously, I'll start listening to it if you do it. That was really freaking good. Paul, I see you smiling. You're agreeing. What do you got there, sir?
Yeah, I agree. So I guess this is my closing, I guess. So I would say, to address what Redbeard and Blackbeard and you have said, obviously I'm a capitalist. I believe we live in a world of crony capitalism. But at the same time, there is a third influence, which is globalism. And this is causing a tremendous amount of problems. And I know it, and that's just addressing what we've been talking about, not specific to aliens, but it is specific to, or UFOs, aliens and UAPs. I just, that was just one of the things that I do believe when it comes to the involvement in the misinformation or the technology, who's doing the technology. there's a lot of influence here, and we're in a new realm here, and I believe that it is absolutely it's petrified. I'm petrified, I should say, at this point. What I would like to mention, though, future episodes. One of my first notes, Mark, was you and the oceans. We didn't talk about oceans. I'd like to.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Second, Blackbeard abductions. They absolutely need to be taken seriously. I didn't get a chance to address that. I'd like to do that sometime in the future. Second, Tesla. I know, Mark, you kind of hinted to it. And I went on around and went on to something else. So, that and radio waves and the impact of the radio waves there. So those are my future wish lists. And with that said, I'm good.
Well, so again, I could see Blackbeard nodding his head, in the background. Jeremy, I know you and I just from our, because we talk a lot. I know we definitely, are on board with what Paul said. So I mean, Paul just kind of 100%. Showed everybody a little bit of our after action review process that we do at the end of these videos. But there it is, right there. I mean, I concur with you wholeheartedly, Paul. And Redbeard, maybe we'll bring this up in the after action review with everybody, offline.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at maybe the next 10 episodes become a little bit more heavy on these subjects because there's no way. So we were trying to end this podcast 15 minutes ago, and we could just continue going for again, these subjects, this subject, if you call it the umbrella subject, there's so many subtopics and topics and pathways and things to, rabbit holes to go down. So I think maybe we spend the next 10 episodes and maybe talk about this a little bit more. Maybe we, we'll do that in the AR, but Paul, I'm high-fiving you. Well said, sir. Yeah. And I think Blackbeard, in all honesty, just in full disclosure, the conversations I've had, on the phone, it's just the two of us talking, and the time we're spending is more pointed or poignant, and it's towards these topics. There was 5 of us tonight. This is a subject that I think many people are interested on. And maybe I didn't do as good of a job as I could have to give everybody an equal opportunity to speak. But even if I would have given everybody 5 minutes and then 5 minutes, there's no way we could have encompassed all this in an hour and a half. So I think, to Paul's point, and as I'm turning over to Blackbeard to hear your final comments, I agree. But we've got to do this again. And Paul, you need to bring up Tesla and oceans. That's a whole nother.
I had plenty of time, by the way. I had plenty of time. Just expanding on what we can do in the future.
Right on. Blackbeard, what do you think? Have you totally said this was a mistake and I'm never coming on here again? Or do you think you'll join us again for what Paul's talking about? What do you want to do, sir? Final comments here. Kind of making fun, but
I mean, look, I'm a nerd about this stuff, right? I really like this stuff. It interests me a lot, and I have a lot of reasons for that. But this is stuff I'll talk about with my friends, and some of them are really into it, and some of them are like, well, okay, but I just I don't know what to say about it. I think that it's one of those things, like, some people are really into like sports, and everybody seems like an expert in the subjects that interest them. But if you ask me about like particle physics, I'm probably gonna, and you have an actual physicist on there, you'd be like, this guy's an idiot, and so it's just as far as these topics are concerned, I'd be happy to come on and talk about them. Like I said, it's something I do with frequency, even in my own day-to-day life.
Jeremy, so Stephen, just when he was talking, Blackbeard made me just think of something. Maybe this would actually, and I'm throwing this out to the group as a discussion, and then anybody who watches this video, leave a comment down below. But and not next week, too busy of a schedule, but maybe we should actually make this into another kind of recurring live stream thing, and other people can chime in and make comments as well. I don't know. We'll do that let's table that for the AAR, but I agree with everything Blackbeard just said and what Paul just said. We haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg here, and we're an hour and 50 minutes into it. So
I 100%, dude. Like, and Mark, we've talked about this before. I nerd the hell out when it comes to Tesla. I I don't know why I like the guy so much, but I think it's probably because I hate when people go in and they steal other people's shit, Edison, and you know, and it's like
U.S. government.
It's like in the government, you know, like it's Edison's bad, but let's be honest. But there again, you know, to Dave's point.
Well, hang on, sorry to interrupt, but that actually is a great point because it goes into what we were saying earlier. To think that there's some kind of huge separation between private entities and government. You don't think Edison had people in the government that were doing his bidding?
100%.
And then how does extrapolate that to, you know, all the big, you know, defense contractors now and I mean, come on, man.
And look at the relationship between how it broke down between Edison and Tesla, and then who approached Edison? It was the government. Edison's like 100%. I can get all of these things for you. I will sell them to you. We will make a freaking killing. And it was that breaching of just all of the most immoral business practice that you can possibly imagine. And they made out like thieves, you know. And it's kind of sad because Tesla was a fantastic mind, one of the most brilliant minds in my opinion, and he was just overwhelmingly robbed of any real accreditation that he should have. We're gonna have an episode about this.
I was like, because that got me thinking about got me thinking about some government stuff. I'm like, okay, we gotta time it out right now. All right, hey, to David, who's not here, thank you again, David.
100%, man.
Thanks for joining us. Paul, as always, high five. I know you were forced to do this tonight, but thank you for still going along.
Clearly held hostage on the other side.
Yeah. It was glad to see that we didn't see anything bad happen to you for not showing up tonight.
Yeah.
And then Blackbeard, holy crap, you got to come back. Seriously, we didn't even do any justice to the things that you have to say.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
You know what? Let's give Paul and Blackbeard final comments, and then Jeremy, you take us out.
Sounds good.
Any last words of wisdom that you really just need to say right now? Paul, Blackbeard, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. Thank you, Blackbeard. It was great to have you join the conversation. You know, I've had a lot of good conversations with Mark and Redbeard, and now David, and you know, your insight is awesome. So I had a great time. Look forward to future episodes.
Heck yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed discussing it with you guys.
You got one last little pearl of wisdom? Because you got a lot of pearls of wisdom.
He does.
I would say open up your sense of possibility. There's probably more to anybody who happens to watch this in the audience. I mean, I don't know. It could be lots of people. There are few, but you know, it's just when our perception of what's possible is right, just like this, you know, which has happened a lot, is this kind of idea that again the material world is out as it's done this. What it's done is it hasn't gotten rid of anything that's out here. All it did is it got rid of our ability to access it. And so if you're just willing to do this, then the world is much more grandiose, and it's really a special place that we're in. And you know, I think they've stolen a lot of wonder from the world, and I think that it's unjust. So it's there for the taking. Just, you know, just keep your sense of possibility open to it.
Yeah.
And for anybody who may be listening to this on Spotify as opposed to watching the video, I mean, basically, Blackbeard was just describing blinders, or I like to call it the soda straw. First time I ever jumped out of an airplane, I seriously was looking through a soda straw. I could see, put a soda straw up to one eye, and that's about as much as I could see. And then with every experience, my vision, you know, my sense of my peripheral vision, my observation expanded. And that's what Blackbeard just demonstrated with his hands. Like, you know, you got blinders on, you know, you've got to find a way to break through and expand or remove those blinders so you can see the world for what it really is around us. And I think that's awesome. And I'm high-fiving you right now, because that's what's always been, every time I've talked to you, you know, it's been that type of, every conversation's been an expansion, you know, an eye-opening experience. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us here tonight. I really mean that seriously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
it's awesome, man.
Redbeard, on that note, we're getting a little sappy and we're at an hour.
Yeah.
And I almost said a minute 55. We're at an hour and 50. I haven't done that in a while.
Look at you go, Mark. You
I'm
caught yourself.
Yeah, but we were trying to shut this down 25 minutes ago. So we'll talk about that in the AAR.
Yeah.
But take us on out, brother, man.
Yeah.
Again, one last shout out to everybody who joined us tonight. And from my perspective, one last shout out to anybody who watches this video or listens to it. Hey, just, remember what Blackbeard just said, expand your horizons, expand your mind and your what's possible. And then suddenly life becomes wonderful, or it can anyway. So
100%.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Redbeard, take us out, sir.
Yeah. And the only thing to kind of end is like, dude, this has been awesome. I really do appreciate Paul, you coming on, Blackbeard, you coming on, Dave. And I probably say this every single time. I'm a broken record at this point, Mark, but we really do appreciate all of the guests that we have. There's so much more infinitely wiser people than myself, and I can only speak for myself, but I would say that Mark probably agrees about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure everybody here does. And it really builds on to that broadening of the horizons, like Blackbeard brought up, and really creating that human and I would say that worldly experience, right? Like we're all learning from each other, and that's what I love about this whole thing, dude. We're bringing so many perspectives, and it's what it's all about. So thank you to all of you guys. Seriously, it's awesome, and I can't wait to do more. And also, thank you to you wonderful viewers and listeners. We really appreciate everybody who takes the time out of their busy days to listen to all of us ramble about different perspectives and theories and all of that great stuff. And we really appreciate and enjoy having you. So on that note, I'm going to take us out here, Mark. Look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not be extinguished so long as there are good people there that exist to defend it and support it. And that all starts with all of us. So.
Amen, brother. All right. We'll see everybody on the next podcast. All right. Be good.
Woo!